last night I didn't end up checking in again because I was tired. Yesterday was kind of exhausting. It was a lot of fun, but it was really tiring. I don't think I told you before, but when we had that break in the middle of the day, I finished reading When Dimple Met Rishi, and I'm not sure what I rate that just yet. I have to think about that. But I did really enjoy it. And last night I continued reading The Cheerleaders by Kara Thomas. I didn't read very much last night because I was just so tired. And I think I got to page like 76 or something like that. And then today I've continued reading and I'm on page 117. And I was planning on wearing my festival shirt today, and I still am, but I'm not wearing it right now because it was too small. Like, they're made super, super small. And normally I would wear a medium, and I bought a large and it was still too tight. So I'm going to take it back and trade it, and well, see if I can trade it and get a bigger size. But what I have on right now is just this striped shirt and these jean shorts and my flip-flops. And that's pretty much it for now. And I'm going to get my cute little festival shirt, and I'll be wearing that later. And it'll fit more like that. Though the festival shirt I have right now is like tight across the boobs and stuff. It's very not comfortable. Anyway, this is my outfit of the morning, I guess I should say. Anyway, we're about to head out and go to the festival for the day, and there's a lot of like sit and watch different talks going on today and getting books signed. I'll be carrying around a suitcase full of books all day. It's gonna be fun. All right, well, I will check in with you later.
So without further ado, let me introduce you to my very good friend, Stephanie Saloma. Stephanie works at Source Books, where she gets to do a bookish girl's dream of talking about books and working with authors for a living. She absolutely wants to talk to you about books, so come say hi after the panel. Without further ado, Stephanie Saloma.
I'm really excited about this panel. We have 4 freaking awesome authors. The theme is not what you expected, and I think how we talk about it is not what you expected because we don't really know what the topic is. So I'm going to introduce them really quickly, just tell you the book that they wrote. They're going to introduce their book in a sentence or two, and then we'll get started. So first we've got Sandhya Menon, who wrote When Dimple Met Rishi and From Twinkle with Love. Kara Thomas, who wrote The Cheerleaders, which is freaking awesome. Tiffany Jackson, who wrote Allegedly and Monday's Not Coming. And David Arnold, who wrote Mosquito Land, Kids Appetite, and Strange Fascinations of Noah Hypnotic. Okay, so Sandhya, will you just give a 1 or 2 sentence description of your book?
Yes. Is this how I'm supposed to hold it? So I wrote When Dimple Met Rishi, and my new one is anyway, I wrote From Twinkle with Love, and they're both romantic comedies. From Twinkle with Love follows a 16-year-old Indian American filmmaker. She's aspiring, and she writes letters in her diary to her mentors, who are also female filmmakers, as a way to kind of deal with love and life and friendship drama.
Yeah, I was like waiting for permission. Hi, I'm Kara Thomas. I wrote The Cheerleaders, my most recent book. It's about a small town in upstate New York that is approaching the 5-year anniversary of the horrific deaths of 5 cheerleaders, and about how the sister of the last cheerleader to die uncovers that things aren't really what they seem, and the murders weren't really what they seemed.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Jackson. I wrote the book Monday's Not Coming. It is about a girl whose best friend is missing and no one seems to notice until she shows up 1 year later.
Hi, I'm David Arnold. I wrote The Strange Fascinations of Noah Hypnotic, which is about a kid named Noah who feels like he's changing and no one else in his life is. It's the summer before his senior year in high school. He goes to a party, he gets drunk, he lets this strange kid named Circuit hypnotize him, and when he comes out of hypnosis, everyone in his life has minor, subtle changes. So like his mom has a scar on her face where there wasn't a scar before, and his dog, who always walked with a limp, is suddenly catching frisbees, and he's got to figure out what's going on.
Cool. Okay, so before a panel, I usually email all the authors asking them just some questions, but also what the topic means to them. And typically, I get basically the same answer from all of the authors. This time, I did not. They were really different answers, which was not what I expected. So I thought we would just start with you telling us what the topic means to you, because it was really fascinating how completely different they were. You want to start?
Yeah. So I was a little surprised because when they told me who my panelists were, they're amazing. And I'm the only rom-com writer here, and I was like, really? A stranger than what you expected now? But then I thought about it, and I realized one of the comments I get frequently is, my first book, When the Moon Met Rishi, is kind of an arranged marriage type story. So it's these two kids whose parents want to arrange their marriage in the future, and so they send them to this coding camp to see if they'll be compatible. And I get a lot of comments about, well, Dimple was so fiercely feminist, she would never fall in love with Rishi if she was so against arranged marriage and stuff. That's very unrealistic. And it's funny because my family has a lot of arranged marriages, and so I have a lot of arranged marriage stories. And one of my favorite stories is kind of a similar story where, so there were these two people whose parents wanted them to get married, and the guy basically looked at the girls like, so there's a thing called biodata, if you don't know what that is. It's basically like your information summed up on the sheet of paper, kind of like a resume that gets like past the girls, gets past the boys gets past the girls. So the boy read the girl's biodata and said, I don't think so, I don't think we'll be really compatible, you know, no thanks. And so unbeknownst to them, they joined the same WhatsApp friend group, and they were chatting with all their friends. They had a lot of mutual friends, and they started talking. They didn't realize that, you know, it was them. Like, they just started talking, and they became really good friends. They ended up going out to a movie and dating in secret because their parents, you know, had wanted to arrange their marriage, and so they were like having the secret tryst without knowing like their parents had actually set them up, right? And so eventually they went to their parents and told their parents what had happened. Their parents were like, yeah, you dumbass, that's the same. So they ended up getting married, and they're happily married now. So that kind of strange stuff happens even with arranged marriages, so that's kind of my story.
Not to pivot too quickly to murder, but all of my books are mystery thrillers, so I guess in the most literal sense, not what you expected, is I never want the ending or the culprit or the whodunit to be what the reader expected. I read a lot of mysteries and thrillers, and like the worst is when you figure it out like a quarter in, or they're like, this book has like a crazy twist, and then like the first 20 pages, it's like, this is the Sixth Sense, man. I think your books have the best twists that I never like figure out, and they're just crazy at the end. So yeah, that's not what you expected means to me in the most literal sense.
I just want to ditto whatever Kara said. Can I do that?
Sure.
Okay. No. Well, yeah, I feel like same thing. I think that people read my books and kind of expect and have an people usually know what's going to happen, and then they're like, oh wait, no, I was 100% wrong. Everyone's like, I did not. That was so like church, y'all. They were like, so yeah, I have a lot of plot twists in all my books, and now people don't trust me, but I love y'all.
Has anybody ever been on a cruise ship?
Yes.
Okay, so no offense to you guys who like cruise ships. In 2010, my wife and I went on a cruise ship, and for those of you who've been on cruises, they always have these like lavish evening performances. The thing about a cruise, it's essentially a mobile prison. Like, you've given them your money, They have you right where they want you. You're going to eat the food they give you. You're going to go to the performances that they provide, and that's a cruise ship. And about 2 days in, my wife and I are like, what have we done? We've made a horrible mistake. But one of those performances, one night was a hypnotist, and he asked for volunteers. And I remember thinking, good luck with that, dude. Like, who in their right mind is going to get up on stage in front of a large audience of strangers? And, like, who knows what they're going to say and do when they're under? But yeah, a bunch of people, they're all boozed up because it's a cruise ship. So a bunch of people, yeah, me. And one of the women who was hypnotized, swear to God, when she came out of hypnosis, the look on her face was like, she did not know where she was, or who she was with, or what was going on. And you run into the same people like on the cruise ship, because it's a prison, you're there for a week. I saw her on the boat numerous times, and that look never left her face. And so the seed for my book was, what if you were hypnotized and you came out of it and it was an alternate reality? So that changed pretty drastically as I wrote the book, but the cruise ship was not what I expected.
How many times can we say that throughout this period? So that kind of, you already answered my next question, which was, where did the seed for the story come from? Because I know, Tiffany, yours came from like 2 cases. So can we talk about that a little bit and the research that went into building a realistic story based on something that actually happened?
Yeah, so this book actually, Monday's Not Coming, is based on 2 cases actually. One that happened in Washington, D.C. of girls that were missing, and another one that happened in Detroit, Michigan of 2 siblings that were missing. And I sort of had to combine both because they both had so many similar elements in terms of children of color who are missing and not getting the attention that they should. And so it was actually pretty difficult in a sense to sort of like build that and trying to tell the story from not per se the family member, but from a best friend's perspective, because no one really thinks about like the other ancillary people who, you know, are affected by someone who's missing. And so I really wanted to focus on that in a sense. And there was a lot of course, research that had to take place. Not as much as allegedly. Allegedly had a lot of, my first book allegedly had a lot of research and a lot of interviews and stuff like that. This one was more talking to actual experts, legal experts in terms of like, you know, and social workers, more than I did actually for allegedly. So it became more of a onus, and to be honest, I didn't like this book until a week before it came out. So it was a bit more of an onus, and I think most authors could agree second books are the worst.
Oh my God.
Yes. So because of that,
vent a little bit.
yeah, we could go all night.
Nobody wants to hear that.
No one wants to hear that. Yes, you know, writing is fun, guys. Anyway, so yeah, there was a lot of research that went into this particular book. But in terms of, it was different than the research I did for allegedly. But still, all in all, it was great to actually come up with a story that was realistic in a sense, and still have a plot twist in it, but still have those moments where this actually could happen. So that's my show.
I'll piggyback off of you because mine was sort of inspired by a true crime too. There's a town in upstate New York called Dryden, where in the early 90s, late 80s, the town was basically just stalked by death. Specifically the high school, a lot of people that were connected to the high school, so there were 3 cheerleaders, a football coach. People just kept dying in Dryden in these horrible, like, tragic ways. There was an abduction, a murder, a drunk driving accident, a suicide. But they were in such close proximity to each other, and all the people knew each other, that it became like this town myth that these people were cursed in this town. And you'd think that there would be just so much out there about, like, how did this happen to a town and everybody not knows about it. But the people who live in the town really hate talking about this time period because it's obviously very, very painful. And they don't want it to be sensationalized. So that got me thinking about how do you move on from something like that when you live in this town, and what does that do to your psyche when you're wondering, like, am I or the people that I love going to be next? So that's where the seed of the idea came from. I didn't have to do as much research with this book as I did with my other books, because this one is a little bit more about the after effects of a crime on a community and not so much about the crime itself. Most of the research for my other books was like, how long can you go to jail for this for? Just like good life knowledge to have too, I think. Just in case.
Knife research, I remember that.
Oh yeah, so my second book, Little Monsters, there was a stabbing of a person who was murdered by stabbing. And I cared very deeply about the type of knife that was used. So I should not, there's so many children. But I wanted to know like how many times you would need to stab somebody with a knife that wasn't really made for stabbing somebody to death. I'm just gonna cut it off right there. I didn't find the answer online, needless to say.
Do you guys ever feel like you have to explain your search history to the people you live with? So like, I am constantly texting my wife, like in Mosquitoland, there's a really quick divorce, so I'm like Googling, quickie divorce. In 10 days or less. I'm like texting my wife, like, just in case you're on my computer, I want you to know.
I'll ask my husband the question sometimes because he likes camping, so like he knows about camping knives and stuff like that. So I asked him the stabbing question. He's like, why do you need to know this? Why?
I tweeted about that recently, and I had, for the work in progress I'm doing right now, I had to Google how to tell your husband that you're pregnant unexpectedly, and I left it up, and my husband walked in and was like, you have something to tell me. That was fun.
So obviously all of you have curveballs in your books. Were these something that you knew beforehand? Like, was it something you had plotted out, or, I'm really sorry, but were they not what you expected? Just keep going with that. Were you surprised by how the book turned out, like with the changes or the curveball? And also, sorry, two parts. Once that curveball happened, how did you make sure your story wasn't derailed?
So for both of my books, I had no idea the plot twist was actually going to happen. They hit me sort of randomly. So for Allegedly, I came up with a plot twist for that in the shower. It just sort of hit me in the middle of a shower. And of course I was like, damn it. And so I had to like run out in my towel and like write down a note and then finish showering because I still had to get to work. And the same thing happened with Monday's Not Coming. The plot twist actually occurred to me at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I woke up and I was like, once again, I was like, damn it. And so I literally stayed up from 2 until I had to get ready for work. And then I went to work. I was still working at the BBC and went to work, and I literally was just a zombie the entire day. Like in meetings, I was just like, yeah, that works. Sure. So yeah, they vary. Both books had completely different endings, and I still struggle with that now, that I don't intend, and I basically give my editor the heads up, like, yeah, this is the outline, but you know, things change. And so I'm glad that he actually appreciates that more than probably other editors do.
Did you have an idea of where the story was going to go beforehand, and then it just like changed, or you just were like, here's the characters, I'm just going to write it?
I have totally different outlines for both books. And I would get all the way up to the end, and then the ending would be the one thing that actually changed. And actually all of my books now, because I have another book coming out next year, same thing happened there, where I was like, yeah, I have a whole other ending there. So.
I kind of knew what the ending was going to be, except the problem was it's a giant, so I'm trying to figure out how to answer without spoiling the book, but it's a pretty big storytelling trope. And I knew that going in, so then it became, how can I do it anyway and make it interesting? And so, yeah, I mean, I in this case I did know kind of how it was going to end. I think the solution was that it couldn't be the very end. It had to be sort of earlier in the story, and then you explore what happens after. This is a hard question to answer without saying what it is, but I hope that makes some sense.
That actually,
Sixth Sense twist.
It is. They're all.
yeah, I just piggybacking on what David said, like with romantic comedies, there's definitely a formula. You know, you have to have the happily ever after, you have to have certain things. And so that's kind of the big thing, is like how to keep it fresh while also giving readers what they expect. So, yeah.
I usually come up with the ending for my books first. Darkest Corners and Little Monsters, the idea actually came to me because I just had, I got the seed of an idea for a not what you expected type villain. Like how I'm like,
take a shot every time.
But the idea for an unexpected villain popped into my head. Like, wouldn't it be so surprising and crazy if somebody like this did this terrible thing? And the plot was kind of based around that. With the cheerleaders, it was different because it was inspired by this real phenomenon that this town was dealing with, and I didn't have a villain, so it was more of, well, the mystery is how are all these deaths connected? How are the murders and the car accident? What really happened in this town? So this was the first book that I didn't really have an ending in mind, or I didn't really know where it was going. I hope that's not evident while reading the book.
You guys should co-write a book together.
Yeah, you think it's like a
You can have them fall in love, and then Kara can murder everyone.
Yes, you know,
that's love stories.
That's hilarious. Do you know Karen McManus? Obviously, one of us is lying. So she and I always joke we're gonna write like an arranged marriage rom-com murder. And I'm like, yes, let's do it. You know, it'd just be so unexpected. Then we could be on this now. Yeah.
Oh man, okay. So why do you think all of you write true to life stories, even if there are things that are, how else do you say not what you expected? Because it's like, okay. Yeah, so why do you think though it's important to write stories that are true to life?
I think
let's get deep.
Yeah. I think the most concise way I could say it is that people that are reading our books are going through the stuff that they're reading about. Like, there's a lot of hand wringing and pearl clutching about like what is too much for a kid to handle, what's too dark. But I mean, that's what a lot of kids are dealing with. Some kids don't have the luxury or privilege to have a life without some of the topics that we write about, whether it's alcoholism or a life affected by crime and violence. So, and I think that books can be, for the kids that aren't going through it, it could be a window into what like their classmates or friends might be dealing with unexpectedly. And for the kids that are going through that stuff, it's just knowing that they're not alone.
Yeah, and for me, it was like I wanted to write contemporary that featured ethnic minority main characters that wasn't like, you know, an issue book. Those are so important, but I also wanted, I feel like we have a lot of issue books and people are kind of more accepting of that than just having like a light, breezy novel that's not about like the struggle of being a minority, but it's just like about kids falling in love and living their lives. And I feel like those stories are super important to have on the shelf too.
Cool. I can jump in. I definitely like talking about real life because it's actually happening. I need kids from all generations, from all creed and color, to know that what's actually happening to each other's peers. For instance, every time I talk about Monday's Not Coming, and I talk about the fact that these are girls and boys who are missing, and no one seems to pay attention to that. It's always like, especially in classrooms, it's always like I get these like wide-eyed looks, like, wait, so they don't get like the same type of attention that we do? No, boo, they do not. They do not get the same type of attention that you do, and it's an eye-opening experience, especially allegedly too. People didn't know that, you know, there were actually kids going through a lot of things that they were going through in the justice system. And because these kids are going through it, they don't think that anyone's actually going to believe them too. So that's another reason why it's very much about eye-opening experiences and knowing what's actually happening to your peers. And then that way, in 2 or 3 years' time, when you're actually able to vote or be, you know, a part of solutions, you can actually vote in policies that help these girls and help these kids get through whatever they are going through. So to me, I feel like it's more about learning and that's why, I mean, I think that's one of the other reasons why I do like to put in like plot twists and make it my stories very unforgettable, is because I want you to remember everything that happened, because it's real and it's actually happening to kids today. And that's one of the most important parts about us as writers, is making sure that kids like register the fact that, no, this actually is happening. This is not like a fantasy. So I guess that's...
So, real life throws you curveballs, obviously. So you don't have to say what happened, but when life threw you a curveball in the past, how did you deal with it? And do you have any advice for anyone who might be going through something that wasn't what they expected?
Man, you have been so drunk by now. I just wanted you to know. Like, you've just been on the floor.
Did it make you extra the more you say it?
I'm gonna start drinking every time I say it. It'll be more fun now.
I'm literally an author because life threw me a curveball. He's 6 now, but my wife and I were living in Nashville, and I was a musician. I had a home studio. I was just doing freelance music, and I thought that was going to be the rest of my life. And then through many tears and much anguish, we found out we were going to have a baby. It wasn't part of our plan, and obviously everything was great. We loved the kid. But my wife had this great job with benefits, and I was a freelance musician, so you do the math. It was pretty quickly decided that I was going to be a stay-at-home dad. And now, you know, he's in first grade, and he's like killing life. And I'm like, man, those were the days. Like staying home with my baby, writing my book that no one's ever going to read and nothing's ever going to happen. Of course, in the moment, there was a lot of bitterness and sort of, I had given up. I had to give up music. And in freelance work, when you start saying no, they don't call you back. There's a bunch of other people that are waiting to do it. And so it was a definite, like, I felt like I kind of had to write myself out of a corner. Because I was really, I sucked in school, and I have no qualifications to do anything, much less write a book, except for the fact that I'm a human. So then to go into the second thing that you said as far as any kind of advice, it's just, you don't, I mean, MFAs are great, and like study writing and read books on writing, but like, don't think that you're not qualified enough to be a writer. You're breathing air, and that in and of itself is the only qualification you need.
Yeah, my entire life is a curveball, so I don't even know like what that is, like what's normal, like what's a normal life, what's that look like? Because I've not experienced it once in my life. But yeah, writing, or actually I will say that being a full-time writer is a bit of a curveball for me, because I didn't expect to be in this space. I always knew I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't expect to be doing this full time. And that, to me, is still scary. I come from a West Indian household, and so we are expected to have a job. And if you don't have a job, it's kind of like, well, what are you doing? And I do have a job, but you know, it's like I'm writing. Yeah. So I still am trying to get used to the fact that I am touring and I am like going to school visits, and then, you know, at 9 o'clock I'm like, I should be leaving to go to work, but I'm not. I'm actually still in my pajamas, and I am still in bed, and I'm probably writing. I had to buy like a whole new wardrobe for this lifestyle now, which is so weird. And you know, Amazon takes all of my money, and I just, yeah. So my entire life has been one big curveball.
Yeah, mine is kind of similar to David's in that the way that I kind of fell into full-time writing. I mean, it wasn't something I set out to do, or it was a goal that I had. I knew I wanted to write, but when I graduated college, I was just cobbling together work here and there. I wrote a very fluffy series, Write for Hire, for a publisher. And I wrote a pilot for Warner Brothers TV, and then the pilot didn't get made at the same time as the book series with the publisher tanked. So I was just in a very like low point in my life, and I'm like, well,
Let's tear shit up. Murder some people.
Yes. That's exactly what happened. I didn't go out and like physically murder people. I'm not the Long Island serial killer, even though the timing lines up.
I remember this.
So I had to regroup and figure out like what I wanted to be when I grew up, and it was just a really painful, hard time, because I mean I had a teaching degree. I wanted to teach English. I couldn't find a teaching job. It just felt like all of the plans, like the carefully laid plans I had made in college and trying to make a life for myself were just not panning out. So I sat down and wrote a proposal for a book idea to send to my agent. Like, maybe I'll try to sell a book to a publisher, even though that first series tanked. I had a bad experience with that publisher. My debut publishing experience was not a good one. Like, maybe I'll try again and try under my real name now. And that book wound up being The Darkest Corners. And when I sent the first 50 pages in an outline to my literary agent, her first reaction was like, "What is wrong with you?" But the second was, "I think we can sell this stuff." And she did, and that kind of relaunched my career, and it's how I wound up writing these darker stories, and I just fell into a genre I loved, and I realized that the types of things that I was writing for the money, the fluffy romantic comedy for TV, or the fluffy series for the publisher, it wasn't, my heart wasn't in it. Like, I really just liked to pretend to kill people.
I was actually the same way. I wrote like a rom-com under a pen name, like a whole series, and then after a breakup, I was like up at night, of course.
Tear shit up.
Watching a lot of Dateline,
like up at night, and of course I was like reading like Cosmopolitan, and I saw this, and then I like went to People magazine and saw this article about a real case about a 9-year-old who was convicted of murdering a 3-month-old baby, and I was like, oh no, that can't happen. And then of course I was like, that sounds like a book, and that's exactly how. So I was like, shout out to the homie for dumping me, and having a whole career out
launching your career.
Yeah.
Thanks. Oh, that's hilarious. And so, it's funny that Kara was telling us about how she, and Tiffany too, about how they were writing fluffy stuff. I had kind of the opposite experience where I was self-publishing because I just had 2 little kids at home, and I was going crazy staying at home, and I decided to just start self-publishing because I didn't want to query to find a literary agent and all that stuff. And I was writing super dark adult stuff, and then my agent just happened to download one of my books, and she was like, hey, would you like representation? Have you ever thought about being traditionally published? And I was like, maybe. And so, anyway, lukewarm at first, but then I was more excited afterwards. And so we did sign together. And then, as I was sitting around, I didn't have any ideas. And she was like, have you ever thought about writing a rom-com? Because I actually think you have a good voice for that. And I was like, are you crazy? No, like, I like to read them, but I can, I want to write murdering stuff. And she was like, just try it. And so I did, and that book became When Dimple Met Rishi. And it was just so weird, like, you never know what's going to happen next in writing, I think is the point we're all trying to make, like, just stick with it and things happen.
Okay, so we're going to open it up to questions after this one, so start thinking about what you want to ask them. Last question, what was a book other than, like, your fellow panelists that had a twist that came out of nowhere?
The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I love that one. That I did not see that coming at all. Like, at all.
I'll tell you, so my favorite YA of what year is it? 2018 so far has been Picture Us in the Light by Kelly Lloyd Gilbert. And that book, the entire book is just a twist. There are all these like vignettes that are being told throughout the course of the book, and you're not sure how they fit into the larger narrative, and then at the end it all kind of comes together. It's so brilliant. That book
Which one?
needs to win every award. Picture Us in the Light.
Oh, I've heard so much about that.
It's incredible.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Cosign.
The book I'm reading now, I'm not done with it yet, so I don't know if like the twist holds up, but I just got to the twist in Something in the Water by Catherine Stedman. It's an adult thriller, very like Hitchcockian.
A book that actually just recently came out, she threw me for a loop. It was a book I blurbed earlier this year called All the Stars, read by Kit Britt.
Oh, See All the Stars?
See All the Stars. Sorry, y'all.
That was a good
Yeah, that was a really, and she has such a poetic voice that the whole book is just gorgeous. It's a YA book, and it's really, I'm the same way. Like, I can usually see like plot twists and stuff like coming a mile away, but this one I was like, oh girl. So of course I immediately like text her later. I was like, okay, you got me.
All right, thank you guys. Does anyone have any questions? Raise your hands high. We'll have someone bringing the mic
All
to
the way
you.
in the back.
Don't forget to hold the mic up so we can hear you.
Hi, Tiffany. This is for everybody, but for you specifically. So my book club in Abu Dhabi read this, and we closed the book and was like, did Tiffany Jackson just like gaslight us? So for all of you all, what are some of the strangest reactions to your plot twists that readers have had to your books?
So usually the emails, and you should really see my inbox. It literally, every subject line says, holy shit. Every single subject line, to the point where it's like, okay. What I love actually mostly about the reactions to particularly all the plot twists and stuff like that is adults have a hard time accepting it, and kids are like, yeah, that sounds right. Like, yeah, that's exactly what's supposed to happen. So I always find it interesting that I actually have to convince adults of these things happening, and kids being, equipped and able and capable of doing some malicious things, versus kids are like, yeah, word, that's what's up, yeah. So I think that's my actual favorite reaction. I probably will answer more of the kids' emails than, the 3-paragraph emails I get from Sandy in Vermont, who's like, so I'm trying to understand what's happening here. And I'm like, oh girl, no,
Whether good or bad, you probably get this too. It's like, I threw the book across the room. Yes. Like, why would you do that? Like, you want that, you hate that. Because I have questions. Does it belong to the library? Did you damage it?
I feel like you've done your job when someone throws your book across the room.
That could be like a good or a bad thing, but people don't really elaborate.
I did a bunch of prison visits this past month, and a lot of the kids were like, yeah, we wanted to throw. And I was like, oh, but I hope you didn't. I hope you didn't throw the book across the room.
In the DNA of my soul, those books.
Yeah, and so the thing is for me, for seeing that, there's a way in which they're almost like superheroes, the way superhero stories in the modern day. So I don't know if you guys thought about that. How about, in a way, I was thinking about that in particular because Otto's pajamas, Roshani didn't say this, but are Spider-Man pajamas. The entire book, she's wearing Spider-Man pajamas. So there was a way in which I was thinking about that there was that connection between a modern day view of superheroes and this ancient world of larger-than-life characters that are descended from the gods and have powers. I don't know if you guys want to say anything about that.
I think I 100% relate to that. The interesting thing about Hindu mythology is that it's inextricable from our religion. And so it's a very careful balance of how do you not exoticize your own culture, but how do you address that these stories are alive? When you think about fairy tales and myths, they're told over and over again. They are living things, and they deserve to be reincarnated in modern forms. And you can't have that tension of them feeling like superheroes and at the same time recognizing the sacred space that they also live in.
No, I was just going to say, it's the same, in my mythology, it informs the culture and it carries on for generations. And what's really interesting is when the Spanish came and colonized many of the city-states in the 1500s, they destroyed all of the books. And so only 3 books survived. They actually just found the recent one and authenticated it in Mexico. So there's actually one in Mexico, one's in Germany, one's in Paris, I think one might be in Spain. And so there's so little to go on, right? And even deciphering the glyphs and the numeral system and all of that wasn't even done until the 20th, really the second part of the 20th book, a little bit of the 1950s. And so think about how new that is, and so much about Mexican culture is oral storytelling, right? And so I have stories that were written down, and interestingly, when you look at the way that the Maya looked at their royalty, they were descended from the gods. So whoever was the king was descended like part of God, and so that was who their superhero was at the time. So it's fascinating.
Okay, so I briefly said this before, but I do want to, is there a particular story from myth that you weren't able to touch on in your books, or that you would love to tell the crowd, that just the craziest, most interesting thing? Go.
I understand that question. And the story goes that a witch lived out in the jungle, and she found an egg, and in the egg came out human, and he grew into a dwarf, and she prophesied that he would overthrow the king at the time. And he was like, I'm small, I don't have any power, I can't overthrow the king, what are you talking about? He didn't want his destiny. And in the end, the king rivaled him and said, okay, well, you think you can take my throne, then you're going to build this pyramid, and you have one day to do it. And so the dwarf does do it with the help of his witch, his grandmother, and he becomes the king. And so I just love this idea of the dwarf king. There's different versions of it, but it's such a cool story.
Mine has more blood in it. But I'll tell it to you. I don't know if you've ever heard the tale of Narasimha. He was a demon king who was once very, very pious. And he was so pious that the gods gave him one wish, and he wanted to be immortal. But you gotta be tricky when you ask the gods for immortality. So he said, I don't want to be killed daytime or nighttime. I don't want to be killed by a man or by a beast. I don't want to be killed indoors or outdoors, and I don't want to be killed by any weapon. Ha! Gotcha! And then he just started wreaking havoc on the universe, and the gods were like, we made a mistake, can someone fix this? And here is what the god's solution was. One of the gods, Vishnu, was reincarnated in the form of Narasimha. And he appeared to the demon king inside of a pillar, not as a man or as an animal, but both, with the head of a lion and the torso of a human. And he came to him, not at daytime or nighttime, but both, twilight, dusky hours. And he came to him not indoors or outdoors, but both, in a courtyard. And he ripped him apart, not with any weapons, but his own sharp claws. You're welcome. That was a bedtime story, by the way.
So tonight, kids, say, Mom, Dad, can you tell me that wonderful, I want a sweet dream. Tell me the wonderful story about the demon king getting torn